Chapter 1 focuses on the era of human history known as prehistory or before history. It is called this because there are no written records by our ancient ancestors and other hominids that were in existence at this time, and we have to rely on the discoveries of archaeologists and anthropologists to understand what life was like and the process of evolution during this time period. Homo sapiens sapiens is what we are identified as a species, and we are under the genus of hominids. Hominids are apes that are able to walk upright, I should say descendants of apes, that are able to walk upright bipedally and can travel around without the use of their hands and arms for locomotion. So we can walk on just two legs. Other defining traits are the use of tools, language, and complex cooperative social structures. One of the earliest hominids that has been discovered is Australopithecus, who appeared in East Africa about 4 million years ago and survived for another 3 million years up to 1 million years BCE. They walked upright on two legs, had well-developed hands, and could use stone tools and was able to not control fire, but use fire to survive. Here are the skeletal remains of Lucy, one of the most famous archaeological finds in history. And this is what we believe Australopithecus would have looked like had we seen it today. Yes, hairy, the body structure is very similar to that of an ape. They are only about 3 feet tall, but you can start to see the changes from an ape to human as far as the mouth is concerned, with the teeth being less canine in design. After Australopithecus, other types of hominids began to arrive on the scene, beginning with Homo erectus, known as upright man. They appeared 2.5 million years ago and survived till about 2,000 years ago. And they originated in East Africa, although they migrated to East Asia and into Europe. They had larger brains than Australopithecus and used more sophisticated tools such as spears rather than just rocks to achieve their goals. And that we know for sure they could control fire. Once it was there, they could also create it probably on occasion. They could control it and use it. We would find mounds and mounds and mounds of ashes next to their burial sites because we know that they were living there for a long period of time and could keep the fire sustained. They had the ability to communicate, although they talked more through chirping noises rather than the low grunting noises that are often associated with later hominids. And they paved the way for the next type of species to arrive, which is Homo sapiens. We as Homo sapiens sapiens are related to Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens had a much larger brain than Homo erectus, which you can see by looking at the image here, the redesign. This is a Homo erectus right here. And the forehead is flat because there's not the brain in the front, the frontal lobes are not as developed as that of a human's, which is where the ability to have conscious thought and reflection occurs. Because humans or Homo sapiens were able to reflect and think and process things at a higher level and could communicate because they also had more developed vocal cords and a more developed tongue, they could live in more organized societies and could be a much more successful species. They were able to spread throughout Eurasia and also spread into the Americas because they could survive outside of the temperate zones, the climates that had the same temperature all year, because they could take advantage of the environment, such as finding animal furs and better dwellings to live. They could survive in more inhospitable areas. Homo sapiens used knives, spears, bows, and arrows to survive. And because they survived so well, they actually put a tremendous amount of pressure on other animals that lived around them because they were victim to falling prey to them in their survival. This is the migration patterns. This is the population peopling of the world. We see began here in East Africa, and the red dots represent Homo sapiens. And it's important to note that all of these hominids were hunter-gatherers, meaning that they would follow the patterns, the migration patterns of animals to go hunt and eat them. So where the animals traveled, they would travel with them. And they would also go find fruits and vegetables. That would be the foraging part. So the blue squares is Australopithecus, and during those 3 million years of existence, it pretty much stayed in Africa, mostly southern Africa, whereas Homo erectus began the journey out of Africa into Europe and into East Asia. And the red dots shows that Homo sapiens went throughout the entire globe and were able to use their better intellect to survive the elements of harsher climates and populate the rest of the globe. It's examples of the tools that were used to hunt down larger animals. As the climate changed, such like we went from a period of very cold weather, and the climate then began to warm up, which led to more pressure on animals such as the mammoth, along with the hunting of early Homo sapiens, led to their extinction. This time period is known as the Paleolithic Era, the Old Stone Age. During this period of time, there was, again, a nomadic existence which prevented the opportunity for a civilization or really large, well-developed, and socially stratified cities to occur. We see more bands of hunters and gatherers in about the size of 30 to 50 people, because anything less than 30, you could fall victim to your enemies or to large animals. And anything over 50 would be almost impossible to sustain with a foraging nomadic existence. And we also see that labor was divided, where men would do the hunting and women would do the hunting and the gathering. There was relative social equality in this time period because all that really mattered was acquiring food and surviving. And so women gathering wheats and grains as well as fruits and vegetables was just as valuable as men gathering meat from hunting large animals. There was no conception of private property or of land being owned by somebody at this time, and we know for sure that they lived an egalitarian existence. So a pretty simple life, just traveling and surviving in these small bands. However, on occasion, we do find settlements of early Homo sapiens where they would migrate to an area where there was so much animals and other resources and food available, and the climate was always the same year-round, that they could live there without having to migrate to other locations. And these became heavily populated settlements. These are our Paleolithic settlements. Later on in the next couple of chapters, we're going to talk about civilizations and early river valley civilizations. They're different than this because in these Paleolithic settlements, there was no farming. The people that lived there, the Homo sapiens that lived there, just survived by living off the resources that were available. And these are 3 examples of early settlements. It's important to know each of them and where they were located. During this time period of Homo sapien dominance and them populating the world, we see other hominids in existence as well, such as the Neanderthal, which migrated throughout Europe, Africa, and East Asia. And although, looking at this picture, you can see that they're more muscularly defined, their brain was not as defined as Homo sapiens, which was a huge disadvantage because they could not communicate and participate in teamwork like the cooperative way that Homo sapiens could. There's a very popular theory, actually, that Homo sapiens, our ancestors, hunted and killed Neanderthals until they were extinct, so a form of early Paleolithic genocide. Another hominid around this time was the Cro-Magnon people. Cro-Magnons were the first human beings of fully modern type, meaning that if I were to take a Cro-Magnon today and dress him like us, put him in a business suit and have him walk down the street, you couldn't tell by his face or his body size that he was any different than any of us Homo sapiens. In fact, it's a very common conception that some people start to believe now that Cro-Magnon is just the same species as Homo sapiens. So it's interesting, common current discussion amongst anthropologists and archaeologists. Cro-Magnons, we could see some levels of high thought beyond just their use of tools. We see them worshiping things such as these Venus figurines, these dolls that are crafted out of stone and other resources around them to look like pregnant women. They are fertility idols. These are idols that they could worship and hopefully pray to ensure that there would be more offspring coming and that the pregnancies would be happy and healthy. Because at this time, life and success in life was about procreating and making more. The existence of humans was far from a sure thing. We also see early cave paintings from them as well. This is ritualistic acts trying to promote a hunt, maybe. But we see these cave paintings throughout Europe, and they are a sight to behold. So they definitely show the ability to appreciate art and to record something from their time period. After Cro-Magnon, we then see Homo sapiens sapiens emerge as the species, which is what we are, and several very exciting things occur. They are part of the Neolithic era, which is the new Stone Age. We see the development of tools that aren't just rocks, but are rocks that are polished, or tools that are polished so that they're smoother. If you've ever tried to hammer a nail with a hammer without a grip, you understand that you can get more blisters, it's more painful. So this shows a educated ability to realize that by having smoother tools, that it's a mix for an easier job done. More noticeably, we see the development of farming during this time period. We see women begin to systematically start cultivating plants and planting them and farming them, and men start to gather and domesticate animals rather than just consistently hunting wild animals. This time period began roughly 12,000 to 6,000 years ago, depending on what part of the world you are in, what region. Early agriculture, as far as like advanced agriculture, began about 9,000 BCE. It emerged independently in several parts of the world, as you can see in this map right here, and it allowed for many exciting developments in social structure and actions performed by early Homo sapiens sapiens. Because there's farming, there's more food made available. With more food and a healthier diet, more Homo sapiens could survive longer and live longer lives. So we see a massive boom, a giant growth in the population of Homo sapiens. With this surplus in food, since there's more food available, not everybody needed to go out to hunt for food or to go and try and forage for food because they were just growing it. This gave the opportunity to other members of a settlement or early towns, because the population is growing and creating these urban centers, to go out and get involved in craftsmanship. Items such as developing pottery to store food or to store other items. The creation of metallurgy, in particular bronze, taking copper and tin, melting the two together, and then letting them cool to form metal objects which are better for farming and for hunting. And the development of textiles, being able to weave together certain cottons and other fabrics around the area to create clothing that was different than just animal fur. This is specialization of labor, and this leads to a more distinct and well-developed society where there's more goods available that lead to a better quality of life. Because of this better quality of life, population continues to explode and get bigger, and we see larger villages and towns emerge. The most famous of which is Çatalhöyük, which is located in Turkey, or modern-day Turkey, and it existed from 7,250 BCE to 5,400 BCE. This is the archaeological site of it, and this is what we figured would have looked like had we been there back during that time. We see very well-developed buildings, and we see districts. We see buildings that, for people who had more wealth, that were larger. We can tell that farmers who did most of the farming lived in one area of Çatalhöyük based on the artifacts found on the site. We can tell that merchants of different types lived together as well. So we start to see social stratification emerge as a result of the specialization of labor and the abundance of food for survival. Religious values begin to develop and change from just worshiping fertility, but to also worshiping gods that represented, or spirits that represented crops, as well as the sun coming up and down, rain, and the idea of rebirth. And as these populations grow, we start to see urbanization exist. And one of the earliest urbanized villages is Jericho, which used mud huts, and is famous for creating a defensive wall. Why would it need to create a wall? Well, that's because Jericho was a very wealthy city in terms of having an abundance of crops, an abundance of textiles, metallurgy, and pottery. And rival